Um, I am allergic to alfalfa, and in all four directions there are people with horses, so there is often alfalfa being driven through town, and it just grosses me up. Um, there's a guy I used to know, and he was totally into computer technology, right? Pretty much all he ever did was sit there homeless with his computer and design stuff on his computer. And he used a program similar to Blender. He told me to use Blender because it's free and because they frequently update it. Um, God, I'm so nastified. One moment. Oh. Anyway, there's a bunch of laws with the ATF, and they make things real complicated. But what this guy come up with is it's a gun lathe. He designed it himself. And it really doesn't do anything special or spectacular, except that it also doubles as the frame for a hand-crank gatling gun. Wow. Now, part of the reason for it, if you look at what's on the front of this, those are called 5.56 millimeter, right? No, they're not. That's an AR-15 upper. And they're not all black. They come in all sorts of colors, shapes, sizes, designs. Some of them even have customized Hello Kitty stuff, or customized skulls, or skeletons, or, well, pretty much anything that you can do. There's some artist out there who's designed something for an AR-15 that's that way. Anyway, there's a cutout for the upper receiver, and the idea behind it is that this is a mount where you can basically mount your AR-15 upper receivers, and you can mount them directly to it. And you can also do it in 22 long rifle. And he had this whole intricate thing that he designed, and he was showing me, and he said, you know what, this is what I designed at first. He said there's like 140 something parts in it, something like that. He said it's real complicated, but I was sure I could do it. He said, you know, I always thought it'd be cool to have a robo-mech. And although I'm never going to have a robo-mech, they may have them in my lifetime. Just all sorts of really cool, nerdy stuff, right? Well, yeah, it is. A lot of the technology that we have, somebody had to imagine it and come up with it. And then somebody had to imagine up a way to do it. Like flip phones. Anyway, as far as a Gatling gun goes, as long as it's hand cranked, then it's not considered a full auto. It's considered a single shot, which is weird. But it's hand cranked, so you have to hand crank it. Now, the Starfire design, this is the super simple design that he came up with. He said, you know what, I always wanted to be able to fire all the barrels at once. And I went, well, that's a stupid idea. But as he was showing me the design, he said, all right, so this little thing right here, you twist it, and it'll change the tolerances on this piece right here. And he's showing it to me, and he's got it all worked out so that it'll actually work its way through on his computer and show you how everything's assembled and how it's disassembled and all that really cool stuff. And he's showing me how there's the bore sighter and all this other stuff that you can put on it, like as a what do you call that? As a gunsmith, like you're gonna want to make precision stuff sometimes. And he said, this is the thing, is I designed it so that a gunsmith could use it. No matter what gun they're working on, they can use this. And he's showing me how the hand crank on it He's like, all right, so this is the thing. When you were telling me about taking a hand crank generator and have it so that it bolts up with a common starter, he said, I went through and I found a starter that, in case of World War III, there's going to be literally millions of them in the United States because they're all over the place. And I went, okay. So it's like, all right, so here's where the hand crank bolts on. And then he said, all right, so I had to move the bolts a little bit so that I could make it fit. But that's just a matter of machining the hand crank a little bit different. Well, you know what? Yeah, duh. So he was like, all right, so here's what you could do. You could literally make it so that it'll fire the same way as a regular Gatling gun. Or you can have it so that it changes. He's like, all right, so here's my shark's teeth, or my shark fin teeth, and he's showing it to me, and it's this little wedge that comes out from the front part of the frame, and there's a little wedge that comes out from the back part of the frame. And he was showing me, all right, so out of that big complicated thing that I was showing you earlier, this is what it is simplified. And he shows the whole thing with nothing bolted to it. And then he shows the can that it goes in. It's basically a carrying case. There's a handle on it, on the back of it. So basically you're carrying around something that looks like a round drum about this tall. If you've ever seen the all right, so there's a cylindrical magazine for the original Gatling guns from the 1800s, the hand crank ones. And they carry a lot of rounds. I think it's like a 200 round thing or something like that. Carries a lot. Anyway, the whole thing is about that size. The size of the magazine on an old Gatling gun. And he was showing me how, because of the way that the lathe is set up, each part of it is a different station, and the outside cover is just, a front piece and a back piece. He said, all right, now, in order to make that whole adjustment while it's all together so that you can make it so instead of firing every barrel at once, you can fire them one at a time just like they would on a regular Gatling gun. He said, that's just a matter of doing this. And he shows me how on a lot of stuff that we have that it connects and disconnects that way. I'm like, yep, I'm familiar with the concept. And he says, all right, well, that's your adjustment. So you can fire it one at a time, or you can fire it all barrels at the same time. And as he's going through this, he goes, all right, now this is the thing that I made, the simulation thing for it, so you can see how it works, kind of like they have on the, there was a game that was popular back in the day, one of them shooter games, I think it was called Rainbow Six. Anyway, you get to customize your stuff on that, and it'll actually get into details on the parts. So what he did on his program is make it so he can pull the pieces out and put them back together. And this one little video that he'd made of it, it shows how he intended on it being used, and it was really smoothly done. Great graphics, okay graphics, great animation. But I remember he was telling me the site that he was going to make sure that he was getting the right parts. He wasn't actually buying them. He was wanting to make sure that he was able to do it at a reasonable cost. And he said, you know what? You could reasonably equip yourself with a Gatling gun for under $1,000 with AR-15 uppers. He said, you just go to this site right here. Sometimes they have them on sale for an AR-15 upper for no more than $59. Now, of course, it's like $130 for one of those now. But, on sale back then, it would have been around $80 or $90. Would have been on sale for about $60. And I remember looking at his design and going, you know what? There's a lot of stuff in there that I came up with myself at different points in time. There's also a lot of stuff that came from those designs that I used for a lot of other things, because he didn't just like the Gatling gun, and he didn't just like the AR-15, and he didn't just like gunsmithing. He also liked boats and airplanes and helicopters and all the same stuff I do. Well, not literally. There's stuff he was interested in I could give two shits about, but the point is, if you can make something multi-use, have it multi-purpose as well, you can use it for multiple different projects. You can design it how you want it if you make it for yourself. God, I hate being snotted up. Now with him designing it so that it'll have a hand crank on it, that makes it so that you can bypass a lot of the laws and rules about machine guns because it's hand cranked. But then by making it with a standard bolt pattern that matches up with a starter motor on a car, if there's an emergency, you can transfer it, or what do you call that? Convert it over to full auto electric power. I don't know why you'd want to. Hand cranked is definitely too fast already. That is fast. But the whole idea behind it was that he was designing it so that you could use it on 22 long rifle. You just put a standard magazine in for each rifle, or for each upper, and the mount for it is what holds it. And I was looking at his design, and I went, you know what? That's ingenious. That is absolutely ingenious. He said, yeah, you could make a smaller one for pistols. You just have to standardize it for the pistol that you want to use. Get the uppers for the pistols. That way you can bypass the FFL. That's the Federal Firearms License. People get really into that kind of stuff. Whenever I look at that kind of stuff, I'm like, man, that is way too complicated. But the thing that I definitely have to give it credit for is ingenuity, and it is cool, you know. It is cool that somebody was able to figure something like that out, and kind of cool that they would take the time to do it and have so much passion about it to do that. A lot of the ideas that he incorporated into his later designs, I'm not taking credit for them, but basically me and him kind of bounced ideas off of each other. There's a lot of people in my life that have bounced ideas off of me. Some of their ideas are pretty good. Some of mine are pretty good. Some of my stuff's been integrated into their ideas. Some of their stuff's been integrated into mine. But it reminds me that no matter how many laws you make, there's always people who are going to know how to do stuff. There's always people who are going to have a passion about things. And you never know what those things are. You don't know what every single person's interest is just because they walk down the street next to you once. You don't know somebody's intentions just because you saw them with resting bitch face. A lot of the stuff that we have going on in the world, America is very sheltered from it, but we're not as protected as we might think. Right now we got Canada that's pretty securely our ally. Mexico is decently securely our ally. And we got two big oceans protecting us, right? Well, we also got airplanes, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and of course terrorists who are pretty inventive. When you're broke, you get inventive. One of the things that we see both Russians and Ukrainians playing with right now is drones. Like off-the-shelf civilian drones. Some of them are upgraded to take up to 3 pounds, which is pretty cool. Some of them upward of 5, but those ones can get pretty pricey. And they're literally dropping like anti-tank grenades into the open hatches of Russian tanks, and the Russians are doing the same to Ukrainian tanks. And they're getting pretty good at it. Apparently it's got a limited range, but with civilian stuff that has been bought, apparently the record for a tank kill from the drone's only about that big. It's about that wide, about that long, got 4 propellers on it, just like any other drone. It's got a metal box with a strap's attached to a servo. When it gets over the enemy tank, he presses a button, lets go of that strap, and the grenade drops into the open hatch. And they're dropping them from pretty high up, too. There's a lot more to it than that, I'm sure. I mean, I haven't built any of those things, and I'm not sure I'd be able to figure it out without assistance at this point. Flying them, that's not too difficult, and once you get a little bit of practice at it, you get better. Apparently, the record tank kill is like 8 miles away from the operators there. That's pretty good for just civilian technology. There were some RC flight guys that were telling me that sometimes they wait for like low cloud banks because it'll help to, it basically bounces the signal in between the ground and the clouds, some sort of phenomenon that they're able to use to get distance on their RC range, like the signal range. You get signal loss and signal degradation, so it basically helps to amplify it so you don't lose that. But the important thing for this guy's design for the Gatling is that there's 22 long rifle kits. 22 long rifle ammo is cheap, and he designed it so that it can accept 22 long rifle or 5.56. And one thing that he was telling me about is the 223/5.56 wild. And what that is it's a barrel that'll fire both 223 and 5.56. You don't want to fire 5.56 out of a 223. Yeah, they're about the same size. Yeah, they're interchangeable size-wise, sort of. So they'll fit in each other's whatevers. But the 5.56 has a chance of exploding the barrel in your face. It's a lot more potent, a lot more powerful, and that round is going a whole lot faster. So if you get the 223 5.56 wild barrel and you get the bull barrel, that'll give you the most amount of time. And he was telling me that there's a kit that you can get to make it so that it's belt feed, and you can literally make every single barrel belt feed if you wanted to. But he also designed a harness so that you could have them so that they feed just one at a time from a single belt. It also showed me like how he designed a special belt so that he could basically use the 22 long rifles in the same feed tube system or feed system as the 5.56 NATO rounds if you wanted to put in a belt feed. That's an awful lot of stuff to get into, and it takes an awful lot of time to sit down and learn how to do that. And then it takes a lot of time to do the math, and it takes a lot of time to sit down and go frame by frame by frame and make an animatronics movie out of it, basically. CGI animatronics. But if that's something that you have an interest in, that's what you have the availability to do, and that's what you're spending your time on because that's what you love, totally do it. Get on into it. If you've got different interests than other people, though, that should be okay. If you're not interested in guns, if you're only interested in the mechanical part of it, but you don't like guns, you don't have to do nothing with guns. Nobody's making you. Nobody's forcing you. At the same time, I see people being harmed all over the place. Almost everywhere I go, and it's dependent upon how broke they are. Here in America, anybody who stands up to the government, stands up to the police, is subject to getting arrested on stupid shit, oftentimes not even committing a crime. And that's horrible. The Second Amendment is supposed to protect the First Amendment. The thing that I'm against the Second Amendmenters on is the fact that they're ignoring the First Amendment except when it comes to theirs. Just like anybody else, you want others to shut up and you want your voice to be heard. I want everybody's voice to be heard. I think it is just as important for Alicia Bollinger to fucking speak up in court as it is for me to speak up in court. I also think it's equally important to hold all of these pieces of shit accountable. On the bright side, for them, I'm not willing to kill people. On the not so bright side, for them, they decided to fuck with somebody that they shouldn't have fucked with. They decided to fuck with my friends and family. But you know what? I don't have to shut up about that. The law does not require me to, and I can speak up anywhere that I happen to be. I've been posting a lot of stuff up on my Facebook recently about RPGs. Both actual RPGs, which is rocket propelled grenade, that's the Western acronym. But the Russian ones, the RPG-2, isn't rocket propelled. There's no rocket in the goddamn thing. They're based almost entirely, these throwaway weapons, they're based almost entirely on the Panzerfaust from World War II. The Panzerfaust 150 was the final iteration during the war, but they had designs out to 250 yards. That's pretty good. Now that's because I'm watching stuff on history. There's a lot of stuff that I see going on around me, and I like to know what's up, you know? Anyway, if you guys come up with multi-use stuff like that, I was looking at the Russian stuff versus the German stuff. The Russians were able to make a lot of stuff out of like half as many parts because almost every part had dual use, dual purpose. Kind of like the Americans putting a bottle opener on the M3 grease gun. Pretty cool tech.